Hi all, I have an absolutely classic game to show you here today. This is from the Magnus Carlsen Tour Finals. So Ding Liren qualified for the finals, and this is his game against Magnus Carlsen in round 9. So Ding Liren playing white, e4. We see the classic e5, and we go into a Joker piano, not a Royal Pairs, but Joker piano territory after bishop c5 is played. So now, after bishop c5, it's Joker piano, and we have white castling, knight f6, d3, d6, c3, a6. So this gives the bishop a nice retreat square if needed. We have rook e1, h6, discouraging a pin, a4, black castles, knight bd2, rook e8, h3, and now Magnus challenges that bishop on c4, and white takes. Magnus actually uses this opportunity. This is quite interesting, this juncture. He uses the rook lift possibility. So is this a dangerous rook to switch in to the king side? Given it's a rapid game, this kind of direct kind of attack scheme is more likely to work if it causes the opponent to have to play accurate moves later. F takes e6 is also interesting. For example, b4, bishop a7. Let's just take a sample here. With knight h5, black could still end up playing pretty aggressively using the f file. In theory, white has a technical advantage, but I kind of like black's position already, even here. So both of these options have potential venom. Magnus chooses rook takes e6, and we have b4, and the bishop drops back. Bishop b2. And now knight e7. This looks like classic tango strategy that I absolutely love, to jump into potentially the dark square f4. Because of h3, this is more sensitive than usual. It'll be more difficult to kick it. We have c4, which actually weakens white significantly now on the d4 square. Pawns don't go backwards, and if you look at this structure, that really is an Achilles heel, the d4 square, and perhaps it is a bit overly committal. On the other hand, if white doesn't play c4, black could eventually equalize with d5. I think it's part of it is to discourage d5 from black. As an example, say knight f1, black first supports the e5 pawn to be able to play d5. And if d5 is played here, it seems as though white is forced to play c4 here in any case, because this is the only way to just have a reasonable position. Actually, this white should have a reasonable position there, but black's grabbed a bit of space in the center. If white doesn't play c4 here, say e takes, then black's even going to be threatened to be slightly better after knight takes d5. Black's doing very, very nicely. The knights are pretty aggressive on that f4 square. The bishop's very nice. It looks as though white's misplayed the opening, actually. But here already, after c4, there are significant issues being portrayed here. Betrayed. a5 is a nice positional pawn sacrifice to further weaken white on the dark squares. We have b takes a5. So this bishop, it's unlikely to be disrupted or blocked in now. It's got a fine diagonal to look at f2. We have actually now a very, very interesting also positional maneuver being created because the pawn's not on b4. If the pawn was on b4, it's keeping c5 protected. But here, Magnus switches to a very interesting positional maneuver. Knight c6. These knights are going to reroute around potentially the d4 square. Everything's going to be rerouting around the d4 square, and hopefully for a strategic bishop exchange to further weaken white on d4. So we see that in action. Bishop c3, knight d7, rook b1, knight c5, which en route protects b7, knight f1, rook g6 has slipped in, knight e3, knight e6. So this maneuvering around d4 is very, very interesting, and it looks far too dangerous to take on b7 because of knight f4 here. So against knight f4, knight d5 parries that at least, but now b7 is potentially an issue. We have rook b8, rook b2, knight g5, knight takes, queen takes, threatening mate on g2, queen f3, and now bishop d4. This strategic bishop exchange will further weaken white on the dark squares. You might think, am I being a bit too positive on Magnus Carlsen's side of things? Isn't b7 weak? Isn't there potential like pass pawn if b7 drops? Well, not quite. We have rook eb1. Let's see. Bishop takes, knight takes. The a pawn is taken here. In any case, knight d5. It looks as though potentially there's knight e7 if the queen's not looking at that. Now, in fact, though, Magnus plays a super dynamic move. The knight is not apparently tied down to b7 because of this super dynamic move that is played. Knight c6, just letting b7 go because of this big threat of knight d4. Very, very interesting. Here, knight e3 is played. You might think, hold on, what about knight takes c7? The thing about that is knight d4, and if queen g3, the queen drops back, and the rook is hitting the queen is hitting the knight, white is ending up losing material. So knight e3 is a necessary move here, protecting g2. And we have now b6, now knight f5, and now rook a8. So the queen side is pretty solid now. These two rooks are just not very effectual. They're blunted. h4, queen f4. Magnus doesn't even mind this situation with the queens coming off, where potentially after taking, now d4 has it seems a threat of d5 and knight e7 check. But in this scenario, because white has weakened the dark square complex, Magnus plays a really fantastic idea. I wonder if you can guess in this position. So d5 and knight e7 would seem to be threatened. If I give you 10 seconds to pause the video, what would you play with the black pieces here? Okay, this is magnificent. Rook takes a4, positively inviting d5 and knight e7. The thing is, we have a very, very strong blockading knight now. So d5, knight e5, this is a super strong blockading knight. These pawns are very vulnerable. White does win the exchange, but the king goes this way, much more safe than getting mated, potentially. Or, well, it's a safer route, I think, than king f8. Not getting mated, but it's safer. So white takes, king takes, and yeah, the pawns are just dropping off. It seems a hopeless position. There's already this pawn going to drop off, and then after that, that's going to be weak. So white is actually devoid of much counterplay in this situation, believe it or not. It's a very, very logical positional exchange sacrifice. White desperately plays c5. Magnus just takes that. And after rook b8, in fact, Liren, he resigned with this move. He just felt perhaps it is totally hopeless. He resigned here. If it carried on, black can just take on e4 and doesn't mind one of the double pawns being taken. For example, if white chases up that pawn, black emerges here with two connected passed pawns. And I'll give you a fictional scenario. These pawns can essentially be herded with the king. Even if a pair of rooks comes off, I'll just give you a situation where a pair of rooks comes off. This would still be lethal for white, this kind of scenario. White's just not doing anything. The pawns are all coming down like Space Invaders, essentially. And if white eventually does try and do something, or just wait, it's doomed either way. For example, like this is doomed, crashing through. The pawns are going to crash through in that scenario. So yeah, this is a situation with zero counterplay. If I take you back to the game end, where this whole dark square strategy has culminated in this massive knight on e5, and white pawns are just going to fall off. Yeah, it's just a very dangerous position indeed. And also, if f3, the king could even come to take h4 and then rook a2 and king g3. There's all sorts of interesting possibilities. But essentially, white doesn't have too much counterplay. There's also this passed c pawn. So there's multiple aspects to this position. It's just very, very easy for black to play, and white is without much counterplay at all. Okay, so congratulations to Magnus on this very, very interesting logical game, very classically played, and shows us that with black you can really fight on these dark squares, and a magnificent dark square strategy is demonstrated here with a fine positional exchange sacrifice. Okay, I hope you got something from that. If you want to challenge me for a game, kingscrusher.tv or bit.ly/chessworld for a tournament-style game, 5 days move. And if you register there, I'll be able to invite you for a game soon after. Check out my playlists, bit.ly/LeaderChess, bit.ly/StopFishChess, and there's as well a chat facility at kingscrusher.tv/Discord. Comments, questions, likes, shares, subscribes with the notification bell, always appreciated. Thanks very much.